We figured it out with the men, and that was relatively simple because we had a book. But we're kind of worried about whether or not we're going to be able to figure this one out because basically we just have our own experience. What do women really want? We're going to figure it out tonight. And if you say sovereignty, you've just been reading Chaucer, and that's the wife of Bastile, and maybe she's wrong. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. So what do you want? Can I ask you what women really want? Are you an actually reliable witness here? Are you a woman?
I don't know. I think
we had some doubt about that in early days of our streaming together. Have we figured it out yet?
Yeah, we did. Well, I don't know. Am I sufficiently transitioned to be able to answer this question yet? I'm not sure. I think I have some ideas. I don't know if I'm going to fairly represent the rest of the sex. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah.
I've got a book. I've got a book. You think if so if we maybe I mean we had the men's book with the poetry, right? Maybe if we have a book by a woman about what women want, we'll be better off.
Yes.
Okay. Here, let me.
Relying on a book is always a good idea.
Relying on a book is always a good idea. I think this women want. I want more books, right? Always. Let me think. What else do I want? More books. More bookcases. I got some more bookcases delivered last week, but I have to rearrange my entire study to get them in there. So I want time to rearrange my bookcases so that I can put my books in a place where I can find them instead of all over the floor and in stacks and shelved in ways. So that's what I want, a library. Do you remember? So this was I haven't seen the live action Beauty and the Beast, but the cartoon one came out when I was in grad school, and I was with my then not yet husband, and we went to see Beauty and the Beast in the theater. And the moment when Belle is shown the library, yeah, that did it for me.
Yeah. You would have been set.
Beast with bookcases. There you go. That's what we want.
Well, I've thought about this a little bit because it's difficult now to figure it out when you're bombarded with different versions of what is what's an appropriate vision for life as a woman now. You know, we get part of my gender vetting and playing around with that is really just the magnification of the experience of being a woman in a culture where you're essentially turned into a pseudo man in order to function inside it.
Yeah.
So I amp it up, or I did, quite successfully, and then thinking about how things should be in the other way when we're not transformed into pseudomen and what that would mean for how we want to be treated as women, and also what kind of lives we would prefer to have instead of an industrialized pseudo-masculinity. Yeah.
Okay, you've already been thinking about this really hard, and you're like an hour and a half into where we're going.
Oh, sorry, I skipped ahead again.
Girls and boys, we need to catch up with her. She's usually like 5 steps ahead of me. Yes, exactly. Right. It's like, let me think of my back up. Why don't we know what we want? Right. It should be right. And so when I posted tonight's, like, the ad for tonight's discussion, and I got a lot of answers instantaneously. One of them was instantaneously, of course, women want sovereignty, which, if you've ever read Chaucer in high school and you read The Wife of Bath's Tale, you know that that's the answer to the puzzle. Good job. You did your homework. But that's Chaucer's answer in The Wife of Bath's voice. So maybe that's just a man saying what women want.
Can you explain that? Because we never read Chaucer in high school.
Oh, okay. So this, I do remember this, right?
Just
because
break it down for the colonials.
Okay, for the colonials. So the Canterbury Tales are interesting because they are afraid. They're the main narrative itself is the frame narrative, with Chaucer as one of the characters in the tale, right? So he does the sort of Tolkien God thing of putting himself in the story. So he's with these company of pilgrims, and the pilgrims all agree to tell a certain number of stories. I think Chaucer never finished the full cycle of what he projected he was going to do. He wanted to be Boccaccio with the Decameron, and Boccaccio did actually pull this off, that he was going to have 10 characters tell 10 stories for 10 days, right? And so you get 100 stories. Chaucer was going to have, I forget off the top of my head, however many pilgrims, and they were going to tell how many cycles of stories. And he didn't end up giving all of the characters stories, and he didn't give them as many stories as he projected he would. But in any case, it's sort of a challenge to say whether or not all of the characters are meant to be speaking in Chaucer's own voice or not. He's a better storyteller than that. So, for example, the partner in the summoner who the movie version of Chaucer is going to eviscerate in fiction are made to be pretty loathsome characters. And again, I don't remember what their stories are because who reads them. But everybody reads The Wife of Bath's Tale because she has this long prologue about how she's had 5 husbands. I'm remembering this from high school. I haven't reread it since, well, I actually did reread it more recently, but you remember from high school. She's had 5 husbands, and then, she goes on a lot about herself to start with, as maybe women do, and then goes into her story, which is a story of one of my friends answered this. It's Sir Gawain and this woman, and she sends him off on a quest to redeem himself from having raped her, I think. No, I'm forgetting. Anyway, this is what's interesting about it. Everybody remembers the punchline and not the setup. That he goes off on a quest to find out what it is that women really want, and in the course of it gets tricked into having to have sex with this old woman who transforms herself into a young, beautiful young woman, and she's going to give him the answer. And the answer is what women want is sovereignty, which, if you read this in high school, means nothing because you don't know what the word means.
Yes. So
this is what's complicated about it. That answer is embedded in Chaucer's frame narrative, which is embedded in The Wife of Bath's telling the story. And the question is, of course, is The Wife of Bath meant to be a reliable narrator or not of her own story? And then the claim being, she's had these 5 husbands, all of whom she's outlived, right? So she's a widow multiple times. And the sense is that she's this horrible old woman who's had all these men, and she tells her story about how what women really want is to rule over men.
Well, that is that's the complaint on the interwebs right now, isn't it?
Guess what, guys? You've achieved the 14th century. We will now mock you. Yes, no, Chaucer had figured it out back in the day, right?
Mhm.
Learn to scan, iambic pentameter. Chaucer already figured it out. That you know, and again, what's funny about this, I hadn't thought of this as a setup for us, but what's funny about it is therefore within the Western tradition in English for centuries now, we've had this understanding that, at least from the men's perspective, and perhaps accurately from the women's perspective, what the women really want is control.
Well, that's just the meme, which can work in two ways. It's like art imitates life, life imitates art. Things become self-perpetuating stereotypes after a while. I mean, I can think of it in two different ways. Yes, that's absolutely true, because there are plenty of examples in it. And then I can think of a million other examples of why that is not at all what women want. Just thinking about the women that are named in the scriptures as the primary archetypes of women. Yeah. So no, it's not sovereignty across the board. Not at all.
Well, I mean, Eve does to a sort of extent, right? And this is the fallen relationship that the serpent persuades Eve to want, you know, the knowledge of good and evil and to be like gods, and then, excuse me, Eve persuades Adam to want that, or at least to want her, or not to want to lose her. I mean, it's interesting how Milton tells it. That it's necessary that both of them fall, and indeed fall in their own particular way, so that Adam, when he should have stood up to Eve and say no, I think that's in Kanye West's song, right? He says, let's put that apple back on the tree.
Yeah.
That Adam doesn't stand up to her, and therefore in fact cedes her control. So the control, the woman's control, is considered fallen. I mean, in this sense, it's interesting that this is a current issue when it's so clearly a, you know, scriptural through the you know, literary tradition through into the present, and yet we're made to think that it's only now that women have actually been able to assert themselves and to achieve something constantly, right? Over and over and over again. It's always this, never in Western history have women had any power or authority, and yet there Chaucer is telling the story in the 14th century about that's actually what women want, which rather suggests that maybe it was a feature of the contemporary time. Otherwise, why would that story have any teeth?
Yeah.
Or even be plausible,
Well,
right? No, actually, women were marvelously submissive in the 14th century, and it's only been since fill in the blank that they became all uppity. Or, you know, and the thing is, that's what's interesting about the Wife of Bath as narrator and Chaucer's setup for it. It's hard to tell whether he disapproves of her, right? Because the setup of this, I mean, she's ugly. She's not ugly. She's sort of obnoxious. And in that sense, it's impossible not to have think of her as Marjorie Kemp now, who is another woman of the same period who famously wrote a diary of her religious experiences. And the thing that everyone knows about Marjorie is all of her fellow pilgrims abandoned her when they were on their way to Rome or Jerusalem, because she kept bursting into tears all the time at the thought of Christ's passion. And every time she saw a baby, and they're all like, "Oh my gosh, go away!" Right? And she gets abandoned on the road to the holy places because she's such an irritating character to be around. That's, as far as we know, a real person. So, you know, it is in fact not as if women have suddenly turned into Karens in the last 3 years. Maybe it's a feature of an enduring sort of dynamic that we need to consider.
The Karen is ancient.
We're also the Karens are also the basis of civilization, right? Complaining to the management about conditions. That's like, there's a wonderful footnote in William McNeill's The Rise of the West, where he's talking about how the British women that go out with their husbands into the colonial period, into the colonies, are the ones that constantly insist on standards. The men are just going to marry, you know, the locals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have a nice time, but the British women show up and, everything has to have tea time.
Yes. Well, that's what happened here
Mm.
in the early colonial days. There was a lot of going native, and then they had to import their wives. I mean, this kind of established the whole pattern of socially acceptable de facto relationships in Australia. We've had a long tradition of not really having hang-ups about people being unmarried until the British middle class migrated here and began to impose their social mores on the boat people, the convict refuse, because they were without institutions, so they just made it up as they went along. And yeah, tea time was rough for a long time here.
So maybe it's just British women that are like this.
No.
Oh, all right. I mean, we've given Chaucer as an example here. So we say he's writing in Middle English. Maybe it's just English-speaking women that behave this way.
Possibly. No.
You think not?
No, I'm thinking. I just thought of it. I just thought of hundreds of examples. No, it's not.
Oh no. Okay, so now we're in the terrible territory of essentializing, right? Is women's bossiness, which is kind of what we're talking about, simply a feature of Anglophone culture and specifically of the middle class? Possibly. Premise one, or hypothesis one. Or is it, and then this my own dissertation advisor, Caroline Bynum, got into a lot of trouble back in the day, aka the early 90s, when, having written a book on the religious significance of food to medieval women, she made claims about women, and she was brought to task for essentializing women because, of course, not all women.
Oh yeah.
Right. So that's been it's like there's this terrible worry that if you say anything generic about women, you're already in dangerous territory. Ladies, do you all want sovereignty? Is there, hands up, any women out there who don't want sovereignty? The chat is very quiet right now.
I got my hand up.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So no. We need like, audience response here to know. Let's see. We say, so Casey and Mel are in there. You need a small library with personal library with small house attached. I agree. About piety says, if women are anything like me, all they really want is ravioli, oli. Okay. No, Casey is hypothesizing here. Karens without purpose become monsters, possibly. Or is it that women without purpose become Karen monsters? Haha. Casey says, I myself would make an excellent empress. I'm not sure. I don't know. Well, okay, so I said I had a book, and I think we want to start with a reading here. And I was very interested to find that this book raises a question that has been asked recently in a famous movie that I know you've all seen. Here is this book, and I'm going to read some of it and see anybody in the chat, all 5 of you, recognize what I'm reading. I hesitated a long time before writing a book on women. The subject is irritating, especially for women, and it is not new. Enough ink has flowed over the quarrel about feminism. It is now almost over. Let's not talk about it anymore. Yet it is still being talked about, and the volume of idiocies churned out over this past century do not seem to have clarified the problem. Besides, is there a problem? And what is it? Are there even women? True, the theory of the eternal feminine still has its followers. They whisper, even in Russia, women are still very much women. But other well-informed people, and also at times those same ones, lament, woman is losing herself. Woman is lost. It is hard to know any longer if women still exist, if they will always exist, if there should be women at all, what place they hold in this world, what place they should hold. Where are the women? Asked a short-lived magazine recently. But first, what is a woman? See, promised. Totemulier in
The
utero.
$1,000,000 question in 2023.
She is a womb, some say. Yet speaking of certain women, the experts proclaim they are not women, even though they have a uterus like the others. Everyone agrees there are females in the human species. I'm not sure about that right now. Are there females in the human species? Today, as in the past, they make up about half of humanity. And yet we are told that femininity is in jeopardy. We are urged, be women, stay women, become women. So not every female human being is necessarily a woman. She must take part in this mysterious and endangered reality known as femininity. Is femininity secreted by the ovaries? Is it enshrined in a platonic heaven? Is it a frilly petticoat enough to bring it down to earth? You know what I'm reading yet?
No.
Although some women zealously strive to embody it, the model has never been patented. It is typically described in vague and shimmering terms borrowed from a clairvoyance vocabulary. In St. Thomas's time, it was in essence defined with as much certainty as the sedative quality of a poppy. But conceptualism has lost ground. Biological and social sciences no longer believe there are mutably determined entities that define given characteristics like those of the woman, the Jew, or the black. Science considers characteristics as secondary reactions to a situation. If there is no such thing today as femininity, it is because there never was. Does the word woman then have no content? It is what advocates of Enlightenment philosophy, rationalism, or nominalism vigorously assert. Women are, among human beings, merely those who are arbitrarily designated by the word woman. I suppose we should say assigned at birth now. You are arbitrarily designated woman. American women in particular are inclined to think that woman as such no longer exists. If some backward individual still takes herself for a woman, her friends advise her to undergo psychoanalysis to get rid of this obsession. This is funny. I mean, it's even funnier when I tell you what it is. Referring to a book, a very irritating one at that, Modern Woman, The Lost Sex, Dorothy Parker wrote, I cannot be fair about books that treat women as women. My idea is that all of us, men as well as women, whoever we are, should be considered as human beings. But nominalism is a doctrine that falls a bit short, and it is easy for anti-feminists to show that women are not men. Certainly, woman, like man, is a human being, but such an assertion is abstract. The fact is that every concrete human being is always uniquely situated. About Pius guessing Schopenhauer, no. Uninitiated says, as a man, I reign supreme. Well, yes. To reject the notions of the eternal feminine, the black soul, or the Jewish character is not to deny that there are today Jews, blacks, or women. This denial is not a liberation for those concerned, but an inauthentic flight. Clearly, no woman can claim without bad faith to be situated beyond her sex. A few years ago, a well-known woman writer refused to have her portrait appear in a series of photographs devoted specifically to women writers. She wanted to be included in the men's category, but to get this privilege, she used her husband's influence. I can keep going. This book is very long, but I'll keep going. Women who assert that they are men still claim masculine consideration and respect. I also remember a young Trotskyite standing on a platform during a stormy meeting, about to come to blows in spite of her obvious fragility. She was denying her feminine frailty, but it was for the love of a militant man she wanted to be equal to. The defiant position that American women occupy proves they are haunted by the sentiment of their own femininity. And the truth is that anyone can clearly see that humanity is split into two categories of individuals with manifestly different clothes, faces, bodies, smiles, movements, interests, and occupations. These differences are perhaps superficial. Perhaps they are destined to disappear. What is certain is that for the moment they exist in a strikingly obvious way. If the female function is not enough to define woman, it sounds like Truman Capote for some reason. Nope. And if we also reject the explanation of the eternal feminine, but if we accept even temporarily that there are women on the earth, we then have to ask, what is a woman? Anybody know what that was? You really should, because this is the reason we're stuck where we are. It's Simone de Beauvoir.
Oh, okay.
Which I've never read the whole thing. It's one of these fat books, right? I've read portions of it, and I mean, she's writing in the 40s, right? She's the lover of Jean-Paul Sartre. They had very exciting um, family life where he's cheating on her constantly, and she's got women love her. It's very complicated. They did not have children. Um, this is the founding tome of the current discussion, but as she rightly says, it's not a new topic. And much of what she does, so she starts off the first she gives it's interesting that the analysis she gives, she starts with the biological data, right? So she gives this Darwinian reading, and then she does Freudian, psychoanalytic, and then she does history, Marxist, right? And then she gets to the part that I'm actually most interested. Oh, I just did I just fell. History. In the Middle Ages, women still retained some privileges. She took part in local meetings in the villages, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, 16th century. Anyway, so her history. And then she gets to the part which is myth, which is the part that I've read more carefully. This is a fascinating book for the way in which it tangles up so much.
There was a lot in what you just read.
That was the first 2 pages.
I wanted to argue with her.
It's almost 800 pages long. Just imagine reading the whole thing. And the answer is the woman has been the other. We'll get to that some, but it's like I mean, and people have been reading de Beauvoir obviously for 80 years now, and clearly a lot of this wrestling with this. I mean, what is a woman? I mean, literally, she asks, "What is a woman?" is at the root of some of our current discussions, because why wouldn't you be able to define what she is, because she's not just a womb, and she's not even female, and what's femininity, and yeah, so
it's it's the deconstruction, the beginning of that deconstruction that people are stuck in now,
right,
on a loop.
Very much so.
Which is interesting, because that would be partially, I mean, at least partially influenced by the relationship she had with her husband.
Sartre, who was they're both existentialists, and I think I understand where she gets to. I mean, she ends up, they're both, hyper individualist, which is interesting. She can get the answer. The answer at the end, when you read through all of this, is that women need to be well, they want to be equals, right? It's like the de Beauvoir is definitely wanting to imagine herself as equal to men, and never in second place. That's the name of her book, the second sex. And to be, I mean, she ends up with something like that. Yeah, so things like this at the end, which is the independent woman, right? When finally it is possible for every human being to place his pride above secular differences and the difficult glory of his free existence, only then will woman be able to make her history, her problems, her doubts, and her hopes those of humanity. Only then will she be able to discover in her life and in her works all of reality, and not only her own person. As long as she still has to fight to become a human being, she cannot be a creator.
This is a very interesting way of framing that problem.
as individuals, she wants them, like defined by herself, and to what's funny about it is I like I said, I haven't read the whole thing, but I have read the beginning and the end, and I have no idea what she's arguing, like what it is she wants to escape ultimately, except for she wants to escape being a woman. She wants to just escape being defined at all by her sex.
See,
Casey says, I thought it was a gay man writing about women. Turns out it was a feminist. Figures. The feminist, the absolute feminist. If
Mhm.
you're wrestling with all of this stuff, thanks Simone de Beauvoir, and a century worth of wrestling with this claim that we can't be our own persons if we're not, if we're women, and take on the roles of women. Here, women's situation encourages her to seek salvation in literature and art. That's why I need so many books, clearly.
I'm thinking like I mean it's sad as she was describing the need to be not included in the gender. I understand that. That would be a kind of dysphoria. I would identify that as a kind of gender dysphoria. Reasons for that are enormous, like in terms of the different reasons why that occurs. But she's around 80 years ago, so her, the onset of her Simone de Beauvoir's gender dysphoria would be different to the current generation now. But the need to escape is an interesting thing, because she obviously doesn't understand, which is something that I talk about quite a lot, that women are at our most creative when we're supported by the structure of a patriarchy. So to be emancipated from that structure is actually to be not creating at all, because it's kind of like those reality shows that a lot of people have seen. They've talked about it. You put 12 guys on a deserted island. It happened once, actually. A bunch of Polynesian guys, they were on a raft, and then they were taken out to sea somewhere. I forget where it was in Polynesia, but they were basically given up for dead. They were marooned on a desert island and ended up living there for over a year. It's a bunch of Catholic Polynesian men. And they survived. They made it work. They were there for over a year until they could figure out, how to set themselves up enough to live there. That was kind of like the plan after being there for a year. And then a ship was sailing and caught sight of the island, and saw the smoke from the campfire, etc., and they get rescued. But you got 12 men that can do that on an island for a year. You get 12 women on a deserted island, you're not going to get survival. You're going to get something very different. We don't have the ability to set the foundation for civilization in that way. We have a completely different effect on the civilization than men do. Ours is not infrastructure. It's a psychological infrastructure that women are involved in building in their families. So getting emancipated to create makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. She's talking about this in a way that makes me think that it's quite possibly a desire to be emancipated from her crappy husband that keeps cheating on her all the time. But I mean, he was redirecting his energy and attention and focus to other women. So of course she's going to want to be emancipated from that, because she's not the primary place that his own creative energy is going to. So yeah.
So we have we start with our pictures now, and we have the sort of "we can do it" Rosie the Riveter image. When you were talking about how women, would not be ending up building the houses and such on their remote island. We do have this
Yes.
vision. I mean, so de Beauvoir's writing in the Second World War, and the Rosie the Riveter is, you know, the women being sent into the factories, which women have been sent into the factories since there were factories. One of the things that Engels complained about in the condition of the working class in England was that the sex roles had been switched, because the women were being employed in the factories and the men didn't have any work. And so the men were I mean, this is the mid 1800s, right? The men are losing their masculinity because the women are there in the factory. So yet again, not a new problem.
Yeah.
But as you were talking, it occurred to me that one of the curious things about, as much as I've read of the second sex, is de Beauvoir never talks about other women. Or I mean, maybe I mean, there's a whole section where she talks about the married woman and stuff, but it's like, for most of it is her, I mean, like she says, the question is woman, right? It's this singular. She is doing what women do, which is thinking entirely of herself through the whole thing. It's only one woman that I don't, I mean, and she's complaining constantly about how this is the myth one, which I've read because of what she says about Mary in it earlier. But history has shown that men have always held all the concrete powers from patriarchy's earliest times. They have deemed it useful to keep a woman in a state of dependence. Their codes were set up against her. She was thus concretely established as the other. This condition served males' economic interests, but it also suited their ontological and moral ambitions. Blah blah blah. But the other, she's always talking about women in relation to men, but it's woman in relation to men. And it really only occurred to me as you were talking that there's no other women in the book. There's just her, which is hilarious. It's all about her.
References. She needs some references to draw on.
Well, I mean, one of the things she complains about is, like, to study all of these myths, all you get are over and over and over again men's images of women. But I would have to read, you know, well, I don't really like I don't like reading de Beauvoir anyway, but that there's this curious, I mean, sterility to the whole thing, because A, she had no children, but B, it's not like she's imagining a feminist, like a feminist colony or something. She wants to be an individual with other human beings, and those other human beings are all men. I'm gonna giggle at this for a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, it's kind of funny. She's complaining about not being able to be creative because of masculine repression, but she's not even able to conceptualize a female colony doing anything. That's such a great on. And the admission that she obviously didn't think it was possible. You know, it's not like Sisters in Arms, we'll all get together and we'll create a civilization ex nihilo without any masculine input, right?
Not at all. And she doesn't want she doesn't want a feminine other. I mean, she wants not she is actually, you know, transgender in the sense of she wants women to be human beings, and therefore to be no category of man or woman. And she wants to wipe out both. But I mean, what's fascinating about it is, of course, from what I understand of her and Sartre, they did have a fairly lively sex life. So it's not that she doesn't want sex as a physical activity, but she doesn't want there to be sexes in the sense of, I don't know. It's I think the place that I found of all of these, maybe she goes through the myths, right? And the myths are interesting because she talks about how woman is woman is imagined by man as all of these others that he's then projecting himself onto. And she quotes Kierkegaard at this point, which it is a pretty funny passage. To be a woman, says Kierkegaard, is something so strange, so confused, and so complicated that no one predicate can express it. And the multiple predicates that might be used contradict each other in such a way that only a woman could put up with it. She says this comes from being considered not positively as she is for herself, but negatively, such as she appears to man. But the thing is, she doesn't, as far as I can tell, when I read her, I don't come up with any like calmer version of who we are as women, right? It's like, she says, I went to work, but I don't want to be pinned down, but I went to this, I went to that. It's like, one, she sounds just like Kierkegaard is saying, so she doesn't really escape from that characterization. It could be that men actually have accurately described what they see of us. Maybe. I mean, that gives us the ability to accurately describe them too. So don't go there, guys. We see you. But I don't think she undoes the feeling of complexity that she keeps claiming men are projecting onto us. Like, that is us. We are that complicated and simple. I mean, it's so one, we kind of hoped that we would like finally come around to doing a video that would answer some of what Vox says he can't answer, which is women's social sexual hierarchy, but we can't promise anything.
No.
I mean, we actually do the answer. Women take their hierarchy, take their status from their relationship to men. I know, ladies, you do that. You do it all the time. And we might talk through that. Possibly.
Yeah, we can do that. I'm still amused that there's no female Utopia in Beauvoir's vision, and it's something that I thought about a very long time ago, actually. Before I flew away to the motherland, Mother Africa, I was thinking about this because I could feel it that this feminist wave was building and building, and it was going to crash somehow. I don't know. I just had a weird intuitive feeling about it, and I thought about what a female colony would look like, and I didn't want to move there. Like I imagined a kind of a world in which women had picked up their stuff and eliminated men from the life that they were living and the world that they were existing in, and I personally did not want to be there. And that's when I realized that I wasn't ever going to go along with the feminist thing for any longer than I needed to survive in a workplace, because I know I've known for a very long time that a world without men in it is a living hell. And it's because of the treatment of women towards other women. It's not an oppression of patriarchy that is the problem at all. There are a million dynamics that are going on between females, sometimes that men don't even pick up on. You guys think you know us. You're so oblivious.
They should thank their luck, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, like, no wonder we're all neurotic and stressed out all the time. Like, we're kind of like jacked into radio waves that you guys can ignore, that are impossible for women. Because if we don't pay attention to them, if we do ignore them, then we are outcast. We are exiled from the female hierarchy. There are rules that you have to play along with as a woman that are unspoken, and yet they're real. And if you do not play along with those rules, then you are out. So it's an interesting thing that, you know, Simone de Beauvoir is promoting this idea of ultimate creativity being possible without men. In my experience, has been the complete opposite.
Well, this is, I mean, what I'm realizing as we're talking about this is at least I have to keep confessing, I haven't read the whole book, but in the parts that I've read, she's mainly concerned about herself in relation to men. And none of it that I've read, and I've read the whole sort of history, the biology, history, psychoanalysis, myth part. I haven't read the what woman is like growing up part, but there's no mention of other women in it. So it's, I mean, there's, and when she's talking about the myths, right? It's like we'll go to Cher being sweet and puzzled. When she's going through the myths, she's talking about, so first she's associated with childbirth, which is horrifying for men because it's about death, right? Because birth and death. And then we get to menstrual blood. In all civilizations and still today, she inspires horror in man, the horror of his own carnal contingents that he projects onto her. Woman becomes impure the day she might be able to procreate. So it's like, it's all, the way men react to women. Menstrual blood embodies the essence of femininity. Okay. How men are in sex. In sexual release, the man in his lover's embrace seeks to lose himself in the infinite mystery of the flesh. Man does not merely seek in the sexual act subjective and ephemeral pleasure. He wants to conquer, take, and possess. To have a woman is to conquer her. He penetrates her as the plowshare in the furrows. He makes her his as he makes his the earth he is working. He plows, he plants, he sows. I mean, come on. So, the myths of virginity, virginal blood, the curse of being an old maid, beauty, right? But not just any woman can play the role of mediator between man and the world. Man is not satisfied with finding sexual organs complementary to his own and his partner. She must embody the wondrous blossoming of life while concealing its mysterious disturbances at the same time. See, sometimes it feels like she's getting upset about stuff that's actually nice. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't you want to be considered the source of fertility? Isn't that a good thing? Right? First of all, she has to have youth and health, for man cannot be enraptured in his embrace of a living thing unless he forgets that all life is inhabited by death. I don't think this is accurate. And what's interesting is I'm not sure how many men can like stomach reading enough of her to work through what she's misunderstanding about them. And he desires still more that his beloved be beautiful. The ideal of feminine beauty is variable, but some requirements remain constant. One of them is that since woman is destined to be possessed, her body has to provide the inert and passive qualities of an object. Virile beauty is the body's adaptation to active functions such as strength, agility, flexibility, and the manifestations of a transcendence animating a flesh that must never collapse into itself. The only symmetry to be found in the feminine ideal is in Sparta, fascist Italy, and Nazi Germany. Societies that destined woman for the state and not for the individual, and that considered her exclusively as mother, with no place for eroticism. Like, oh, for goodness sake, right? It's. I mean, it gets better. I'm working up to it, right? So she gets to wife. She's field and pasture, but also Babylonia. In our modern society, masturbation is considered a danger. She wants, like, sexual freedom. Which obviously she's talking herself into the kind of complicated sexual life that she and Sartre had. What man thus cherishes and detests first in woman, lover as well as mother, is the fixed image of her animal destiny. So she gets to this point, it's like woman is the image of death because of our fertility. And because we're fertile, that's also reminding the man always of his mortality. We got the I've already said that the other is implied in all sexual acts, and its face is usually woman's. Woman is vampire. Oh no, sorry. Excuse me. Man experiences his own flesh's passivity the most strongly in front of her. Woman is vampire, ghoul, eater, drinker. Her sex organ feeds gluttonously on the male sex organ. Trust me, it gets better. It's okay. All right. Okay. So here we go. Now we're finally to Mary. All right. This is another long passage. Are you guys with me? We all went farm boy from Princess Bride, as you wish. Okay. Paradoxically, it was Christianity that was to proclaim the equality of man and woman on a certain level. Christianity detests the flesh in her. If she rejects the flesh, she is, like him, a creature of God, redeemed by the Savior. Here she can take her place beside males among those souls guaranteed celestial happiness. Men and women are God's servants, almost as asexual as the angels, who together with the help of grace reject earth's temptations. If she agrees to announce her animality, woman, from the very fact that she incarnated sin, will also be the most radiant incarnation of the triumph of the elect who have conquered sin. Of course, the divine Savior brings about redemption is male, but humanity must cooperate in its own salvation, and perverse it will be called upon to manifest its submissive goodwill in its most humiliated figure. Christ is God, but it is a woman, the Virgin Mother, who reigns over all human creatures. Yet only marginal sects restore the great goddess's ancient privileges to the woman. The Church expresses and serves a patriarchal civilization where it is befitting for woman to remain annexed to man. As his docile servant, she will also be a blessed saint. Thus the image of the most perfected woman, propitious to men, lies at the heart of the Middle Ages. The face of the Mother of Christ is encircled in glory. She is the inverse figure of the sinner Eve. She crushes the serpent under her foot. She is the mediator of salvation, as Eve was of damnation. I'll keep going because it's sexually equivalent.
She despises the idea of service.
There's a bit where she goes straight up BDSM. I think it's in this passage. Oh, well, this is okay. It is as mother that the woman was held in awe. Through motherhood, she has to be transfigured and subjugated. Mary's virginity has above all a negative value. She, by whom the flesh has been redeemed, is not carnal. She has neither been touched nor possessed. Neither was the Asiatic great mother assumed to have a husband. She had engendered the world and reigned over it alone. She could be lascivious by impulse, but her greatness as mother was not diminished by imposed wifely servitudes. Likewise, Mary never experienced sustain connected with sexuality. Related to the woman warrior Minerva, she is an ivory tower, a citadel, an impregnable fortress. Like most Christian saints, the priestesses of antiquity were virgins. The woman devoted to good should be devoted with the splendor of her strength intact. She must conserve the principle of her femininity in its unbroken wholeness. One rejects in Mary her character as wife in order to more fully exalt in her the woman mother, but she will be glorified only by accepting the subservient role assigned to her. I am the handmaiden of the Lord. For the first time in the history of humanity, the mother kneels before her son. She freely recognizes her inferiority. The supreme masculine victory is consummated in the cult of Mary. It is the rehabilitation of woman by the achievement of her defeat. She sounds like a Cathar.
There's a lot going on there.
I love that. So we have our two movies for tonight are Clueless and The Addams Family. And here Cher, who famously in the movie, which I thought was lovely, is very picky about not having sex with anybody, because you've seen how picky I am with my shoes.
It's wholesome.
Yes, it's very wholesome.
Cher's great. So, well, you know what women want. Most people, they're clueless. Okay, so I thought, well, let's have a look at Clueless, because Cher's whole thing in that film, which is based on an Austen novel, Jane Austen, is she's fixing everyone up. She wants to find everybody their match, and she plays matchmaker with everybody. She can play matchmaker with everybody except herself. And she's this gorgeous Beverly Hills princess who ends up making absolute disasters because she does what Simone de Beauvoir is doing and imposes her own vision of things onto other women.
Yes.
So instead of looking at what is good for the girls around her and the kind of men that they want, she is fixing them up with the people that she thinks they should be with. Anyway, so that kind of that kind of movie puts it in a fun way, like growing up as a girl, what the dynamics really are to grow up female. I think Clueless nails it. And it also shows, which I really appreciate about the story, it shows how dependent on men she is. She can do all of the things that she's doing because she's supported by a good father,
Right.
and she has men around her, or boys around her, that are doing things for her, and her girlfriends are the same. So it's it's an interesting kind of snapshot to think about. Now, I put it against something else, and it was the Rosie the Riveter picture, right?
We're not there yet.
Okay.
I have her against the Mean Girls.
Oh, okay. Cher is a good example of somebody who, even though she's making mistakes in what she's doing, has good intentions. She wants the women around her to do well.
Right.
The other one is Regina George from Mean Girls, who has the complete opposite approach to things, and he's a tyrant and reigning over the female hierarchy like a dictator. So yeah, they're the two little archetypes that I wanted to talk about.
Well, I've talked about Simone de Beauvoir enough, so you talk about yours.
Well, it's interesting now because it's linked with it. Even the movies we're making, even the stories that are being made, all of these women that look very powerful and independent and liberated are still existing in a world where their decision making and their opinions and everything revolves around men. The difference between these two characters, the reason why I chose them and I wanted to put them back to back, is in how they treat the men that are around them. Regina George, she wants to be sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Regina.
George,
the Queen,
Regina,
right?
George, Queen George.
Regina
She's
George,
Queen George.
Queen
Yeah.
George. Yeah,
nice one.
Exactly. So she wants sovereignty. She's not going to she's not going into service. Whereas Cher is enjoying her role. She knows her role as a woman, and she doesn't want sovereignty. But I think this is where men don't understand the difference between women sometimes. Types of women. They're both blonde. They're both spoiled. They're both boy mad. You know, it's like the outside appearances, these two girls look exactly the same, really. The way that they're behaving, completely focused on boys and who can get who can get their attention. The approach is completely different. One wants sovereignty. The other one wants to see all the women around her happy and doing well. And she isn't willing to just go with anybody. It's not a sovereignty claim. It's that she has she has a real sense of what women deserve. She wants the best for herself, and she wants the best for the girls around her. So she's my figurehead of today's discussion on what women want, because I think Cher is a good example of showing everybody what that is in her own silly little way. And it's not independence from men, and it's not emancipation from the patriarchy. It's quite the opposite. Cher is hopelessly reliant on her father, even with her own independence of mind and machinations and everything that she's doing, but she's very aware that she's hopelessly dependent on her father. Regina George, on the other hand, is the daughter of a single mother who's spoiled her and doted on her and given her everything she wants, but she has no patriarch in the background. There is no man in the house of Regina George, so the dynamics are completely different. And the way that
well, and Cher has no mother, right? Her mother died.
Cher has no mother. Exactly. So you see the outcome of like what happens when you've got single motherdom versus single fatherdom, and that I think because Regina has not grown up with the masculine father figure, her approach to men is to gain sovereignty over them, whereas Cher has grown up indulged and spoiled, and she sees men as potential candidates for that kind of life, that she can be maintained as a woman and as a female and doted on by them. So yeah, they're my two characters that I wanted people to start to think about, because we're getting lumped all together in this category of woman and women, and females are all the same, they all want the same thing. This is doing a massive disservice to a lot of women. The thing that you posted the other day with the Moira Grayland making her comments on what's happening to women and how our femininity is being deconstructed in the culture, with the demands of having to pretend that we want what the influencers are marketing and selling to us. There are a lot of Chers that are scared to say that they want to be Cher and they don't want to be Regina George. There are a lot of women that are not comfortable breaking that taboo, because it's become a taboo now. To say you want to be a Cher is a taboo, I think.
Now I have the Chers with the Cher and her friends with the Riveter underneath.
Yes. So she's not working in a Cher likes to dress up.
Well, I'm not sure Simone de Beauvoir wanted to be working in a factory. She wanted to be, a philosopher, right? She did very well in her examinations in the French system, and was incredibly intelligent. And what she wants to be doing is, existential philosophy alongside art. Although it's interesting that what she wrote about instead was what would be women instead of, I don't know, goodness or beauty or something like that. And that as we're talking, realizing that she de Beauvoir is utterly focused on men, and yet claiming that that's the thing that women should not be. I was flipping around. I can't find, there is a passage where she very explicitly describes Mary's relationship with God as sadomasochistic. And I've quoted it in I put it in one of my blog posts, but I used it in a paper talking about this problem that feminism has created for seeing Mary, because, they see her relationship to God in this sadomasochistic way. And it's straight up in de Beauvoir. And that's her own sexuality. Right, it's like this sort of distortion of women's sexuality through de Beauvoir, and like to show the book again, like she's pretty intimidating, right? That women are given this book to read in college and think that they have to come out being de Beauvoir, which means the independent woman and not soiled by men's imagination that they would be good mothers.
Well, she's being Regina George for generations of college women.
I don't think she's even being Regina George. At least Regina George wants men. I mean, that's what's perverse about it. It's like it has not occurred to me until we're talking right now that de Beauvoir is not talking about women at all. She's she's utterly talking about herself, which unfortunately women kind of tend to do, but she's doing it in this sort of blinkered way that is like projecting onto all other women her own dissatisfaction with her intellectual position, which is a terrible thing that blue stockings do, ladies. That obviously we say this, it comes out of the colleges. It comes out of a particular category of very intelligent women who want to talk philosophy with men. Maybe I'm guilty of that. But I don't think so, because I don't really say this to all women. Saying, it's like you have betrayed this. The sisterhood doesn't even exist in De Beauvoir. I don't know that there is such a thing for her, right? That sisterhood claim has always struck me as a bit false. Yes, all she has is sisters older, two entries. So there's no sisterhood in this book. And there's not even her wanting to be queen bee, right? It's just her wanting to be a human being, which is the way she phrased it. She wants to be a human being and therefore not sexed in any way. And yet, those passages I'm reading for you, she's clearly very sexed in the sense that she's addicted to the physical practice.
Well, all right, I'm going to defend women first off with the self-centeredness that is manifested even by De Beauvoir, who's trying to emancipate herself from being female.
She's trying to emancipate herself from being a woman, but the thing is, she's behaving just like a woman as she's doing it. Yeah. So
no, I'm going to defend the girls. They have to be self-centered. Self-centered women are healthy. It's a death sentence for a woman to be selfless in terms of dealing with fallen man or the fallen state of this world, because women literally die without men. Like, beyond all of the BS about how our technology has changed everything and blah, da, 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 no, we literally die. First off, without masculine attention, and then secondly, without masculine problem solving. Because very few women are going to become existential philosophers, and even then, she's clearly not solving many problems.
She didn't solve any of her problems.
She doesn't solve many problems. So we've got this like we've got a need for input and for attention and for problem solving of men, and things that we can't do that only they can do. Without that, we're absolutely stuffed. So this self-centeredness that irritates men is also the thing that keeps us alive.
I'm not sure it even irritates them. I mean, so here, okay, full
when they complain. No, I'm speaking in terms of the general complaint now that women, they just think about themselves and they want to control men all the time. This is like
okay. Usually, when I hear the guys saying that, they just want certain women to pay attention to them. I will come out from behind my cloak of reading Simone de Beauvoir and say be ultimately blunt. Let me organize my thoughts here.
Okay.
No, wait, I've lost it. Carry on.
Oh, okay.
No, the thing is, I don't think men actually are that. I mean, I don't think men pay that much attention to us, frankly. Because why would they? I mean, they make jokes about it all the time. Or at least some men make jokes about it all the time. So we're not doing anything that's ultimately interesting to them, which is fine. We want them to listen to us when we're, sharing stories and stuff like that, which may be another category of this. But I think most of the time when men are saying, you women are so selfish, is like, you're not paying enough attention to me. So the men are doing it too. They want us to pay attention to them.
Yeah. Well, the attention should be different, though. The way that women give men attention should be completely different to the way that men give women attention.
Okay.
Okay, so firstly, I had to finish my previous rant because I want to defend the girls because they're getting hammered constantly.
We're just we're hammering on Simone de Beauvoir for giving us a completely useless 800-page analysis of what it means to be a woman. Thank you so much, Simone.
Go back to bed. Well, women have children that they have to take care of. And for the most part, that's a life or death situation, because if they're not getting input and resources for those kinds of, demands, then everything goes to hell very quickly. So the self-centeredness makes sense to me in terms of just a basic survival thing. But also, women are looking at men because they want to know that they're doing the right thing. They want to know that they're, what's the word? I don't know. I'm using.
Okay, well, let's go to the example you gave us. So we've had Cher and I forgot what her friend's name is. Stacey. Oh, we'll go back to Stacey Dash, who had that moment where she was being outed as a Republican and lost all her friends, right? So yay, Stacey. Being a strong woman there. But we have now the women in their business suits on the phone, just like the girls are, but they're not, right? It's like the premise being that we are supposed to want male careers, and that we are only fully realizing our potential as women if we have the same careers men do. Which, of course, as an academic woman, I recognize really just as a difficult situation as de Beauvoir is here, because yes, I want to be a teacher in, the higher realms of the academy, because I like thinking hard thoughts about stuff that I like arguing about. But I also recognize I do it rather differently from the men. And so, so maybe there's there's an equality, but the not identity in this situation. But the fundamental premise for most women, because most women are not actually in academia, although they're trained in academia to think that they should be in the workforce at this level, is that to be fulfilled as human beings, which is the way de Beauvoir sets it up, right? To be fulfilled as a human being, you need to be doing the kind of creative work that men are. And if you're doing the kind of work that women have been doing, like having children and raising them, you are not being fulfilled as a human being. Well, so that's the place where de Beauvoir leaves everything. It's like you should want to be in this career, and that is what makes you a human being, and anything else for women is being shunted back into second sex and seen as other by men.
No. I mean, I don't know, like how women on phones is kind of right. So this is a WOG thing, but you've got like I chose those images, and I'm glad that they're linked, because it's kind of like women's careers are talking. We talk. For good or evil, we talk. And so essentially that phone, that line of communication and building networks, that's a woman's like unparalleled ability. It's not a first world thing. You go into third world countries, it's the same thing. The girls are all on their phones all the time.
Okay.
Like,
that's cool. Yeah. Okay.
Old Italian women and Greek women on the phone all the time. And, there's even like comedy all over Instagram. I'll post a clip on the Sandwich Press later on so everyone can see it. It's very funny. There's Nigerian Irish guys talking about how if he asks his mum for anything while she's on the phone, she'll say yes until she's hung up the phone, and then she realizes what she's just said yes to. But girls on phones. I grew up with girls on phones. Organizing the entire society of the Hellenic colony that we're in on the phone. Everything was done constantly talking on the phone. So for me, it's women talking. That's our strength. We have this deep desire to form connections with people, to be gossiping, to exchange information, to be talking about who's doing what and do what. And it goes off in two directions, obviously. Like you can go manipulative side where suddenly it's Regina George who's gathering her information and, you know, forming her little swarms. Or you've got how it's manifested in a traditional society where the girls know what's going on with everybody in their family. They know what's going on with their communities, their neighbors. They know what's going on with their churches and everything because they're talking to each other all the time. So Cher and her friends, you know, when they're in their tartan and their kilts, they're chatting to each other as they're walking down the hallway. That's
oh yeah, that was really funny. It's like they're both there side by side walking with their phones. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been on the phone to each other the whole time on the way to school, and then they meet and they're still on the phone chatting, and then they hang up. So that's women. So putting that into an office space and then calling it a career is interesting because there's no engineering required in talking. It's a different kind of problem solving. There's different. You're not dealing with material. You're not dealing with dominance in the material world in the same way that men are when they're in their careers, in their workplaces. Men are making things, they're doing things with stuff. Mm-hmm. They're playing around, they're tinkering, they're inventing, they're engineering, or whatever it is. The girls are talking, so they're not dealing with material in the same way, I think, traditionally. And that's where I'm looking at that, the two images side by side, realizing that women are by nature relationship creators. They want to form a relationship.
Yes.
That is a woman's career.
So we have now in a mere hour and some demolished most modern feminism. Good job. Because no, it's like, so Casey's saying, so de Beauvoir thought she was the perfect example of being a woman. Yes. And yet her whole critique of being a woman is I'm pretty bemused, right? Because you've done better at deconstructing all of feminism than all of my colleagues ever over decades of teaching this stuff. Saying she's not talking about other women, and she's not actually talking about what women's strengths are, which is ironic and horrible. And Casey's carrying on an argument in the Dragon Cameroon chat, which accurately summarizes what we're doing. I think what they're saying, that's you and me, is that the answer to the question, what do women want, is this: they want to reject feminism and be their natural selves without apology to Simone de Beauvoir or any other modernist reinterpretation of femaleness. Yes. So let's do that. Let's say, what is a woman actually, rather than with this fake version, which is she's an imperfect man, which is where de Beauvoir says the entire tradition went. It's saying, yes, okay, if men are writing about the tradition, we already found out that men like writing poetry about women and how much they love them. So get over it, ladies, women, Simone de Beauvoir, that they do like us. They find us irritating, but we find each other irritating too. Yes. So the saying, let's go to these ladies. It's like the different kinds of women that we're dealing with, and one's Morticia and the other one's Debbie.
I hope everyone has seen these films, because if you haven't, you are missing out on gold. It's wonderful.
Perhaps so. I take it that some even don't know Cher is the singer's name applied to the character in Clueless. So maybe we should explain a little bit about what's going on in the Addams Family.
Okay, so Addams Family was a comic, then it became a television show in the 60s. It was 60s, right? It was prior to black and white TV. But it's color TV. Anyway,
it's in black and white. Yeah,
it's in black and white,
and only 2 seasons of it. In fact, it only ran for 2 years.
Yeah, it didn't go for a long time. Yeah. Then in the 90s, they made 2 films to kind of reboot the franchise, and the aesthetics in the 90s movies were based on the comics more than the 1960s show was. Anyway, I was thinking about the Addams Family a couple of years ago because it occurred to me that they're a perfect kind of representation of the ideal family, even though everyone thought they were supposed to be representing the horror of how, you know, weirdos are, you know, these weird characters are gate crashing the perfection of 1960s suburbia. I was obsessed because I'd rewatched it. I watched it a lot when I was a kid, but I rewatched it again and it just clicked to me. I was like, these people are Catholics. This is why they're so weird to all of their neighbors. And then I started like focusing on all of the dynamics of the films in terms of the relationships that they've got with each other and the way that the women in these films are behaving with each other too.
Right.
Because a lot of people was, you know, when I started to post on Morticia and Gomez's romance, and then you know, I had some comments. People said, "Oh, he's such a cuck. You know, he's a real simp. He's simping for her." I was like, "Oh, wow, okay." So to me, Morticia and Gomez were like the perfect couple, madly in love with each other, clearly not using any birth control. You know, it was like the wild romance of a Catholic family. And then Morticia is showing her real power in that family structure. She is not going to work, you know, as a retail assistant. She's not leaving the home for work. But you see in Morticia the real work of a woman in a family, which is keeping it together, and how her relationship with every single other person in the Addams family keeps everything going. So she's like Cher on the telephone, only in black. But then they get this arrival in the second film where they need a babysitter, they need a nanny, because suddenly they've got 3 children and it's overwhelming. So they hire this nanny who's a blonde bombshell, Debbie. She looks wholesome, you know, she's perfect. And there's something wrong with her. So as the film goes, Debbie is revealed to be a gold digger. She's out to get the money of the eldest brother, Uncle Fester. She's going to latch her claws into him, wrench him away from the family, and get all the money, which is what she does. And you see the relationship between her and Morticia and Wednesday, and the dynamics of these 3 girls in the environment, and also the mother, Morticia's mother, who's a witch. And it's a really good picture of female dynamics and how Morticia's enraged because she understands what's going on and the men don't get it. The first person who gets it is Wednesday. The little Wednesday Addams. She starts to catch on that there's something wrong with this woman first. And then, of course, Debbie, being psycho as she is, sends the kids away to a summer camp so she doesn't have to deal with the interference of the child. And then she does what she does. But Morticia has this beautiful moment where she goes up to the house that Debbie has bought with all of Fester's money. It's this massive pastel mansion, and she just arrives and says, you know, "I understand you've enslaved him with a strange sexual spell." But, you know, Debbie, pastels. You know, it's extra hard. Little knife dig at her, and she goes mad. But Morticia is, throughout the film, trying to keep the family together because she realizes what's happened is this horrible blonde bombshell gold digger has destroyed the patriarchy. Her husband, Gomez, and his brother are estranged from each other. It's created this huge schism in the Addams family, and it's destroying her husband. So he is having his nervous breakdown, and yeah. So this for me was like a beautiful picture of how women actually interact with each other. The thing that people don't talk about, women on women combat, and how it looks, and how women have to protect their patriarchy because that is where they are most creative. Morticia is at peak female creative mode. She's sublimely happy. And her job in that family is to make sure that everyone else is connected and that everyone else is, is content. And it's the gold digger, this like Debbie character, who comes in, and she's the one who has to fix it. Morticia's the one that has to get rid of Debbie, ultimately. And then you see the back and forth between the two of them, and yeah, it's a good ending. But what I liked about the visuals for that film too was that it reverses it. People would assume it's Morticia that's the one who's going to be causing the evil, and in this scenario, it's the blonde, the one that looks wholesome. It's this kind of really good portrait of how beauty is weaponized against men to destroy them. So yeah, I thought it was a great thing to focus on for our topic today.
Well,
because
so
what the two women wanted were completely different.
I mean, this is using de Beauvoir as our anti woman. Sorry, it's when you're talking, then I'm thinking, okay, so de Beauvoir doesn't analyze, at least as far as I know, right? And everybody, you can tell me in the footnotes that she did in the second part that I didn't read, but she's not dealing with the what you've been gesturing towards. It's like women's actual hierarchy and the way we operate together, which means therefore modern feminism isn't, right? Modern feminism never seems to be able to address this problem of what happened between women, which is frustrating, right? Because there's this premise that we're all meant to be allied against the men, which is nonsense, because it's in our own hierarchies it's each other that are in competition, not with the men, but with each other. And you can see that. It's like there was, back when I was watching Ink Master about the tattoos, usually, I mean, there are not that many women tattoo artists, and there always be more men in the competition than the women. And the women would always start in the interviews that they had with the artists declaring themselves in competition with the other women, right? It's like, I'm the best of the women, right? It's always, it's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be, I mean, there is one woman, I can't remember how many seasons it was in, that she actually won straight out, and she was a very talented artist, but that most of the time women read just the competition, so that even if theoretically you're simply in competition as such as artists, the women will start competing with each other more so than they're competing with the men. So we slice ourselves off, and to this day, I mean, except in these movies, right? You say it's in the Addams Family, it's in Mean Girls for sure. It's rarely theorized as far as I've experienced. I mean, it's like we've got Judith Butler telling us that there's no such thing as gender, and it's like the women want to write it out. Okay, maybe this is it. Women like de Beauvoir, Judith Butler, want to write out the existence of any of this stuff, probably because they're not able to deal with it. I mean, it's like,
it was very painful.
Yes, it's very, very painful as women together against each other, and that is the great taboo that we're not supposed to talk about. Because if you, I mean, the first thing is, if you are complaining about it, it means you're already the victim of it. That it's like, if you're not Regina George, you are, or and like Heather's, right? That was another one we could have used. If you're not able to surmount the queen bee, you're just gonna get slaughtered.
Yeah.
I mean,
You do.
Yeah.
You do. It's happened to me so many times. I'm thinking of a few things. So
Women want
first,
sovereignty over other women. Maybe that's it. But the thing is, I
yeah.
don't know if that's quite true, right? It's like we've got Cher. I think I like your examples: Cher versus Regina, or Morticia versus Debbie. That
Well, Cher's a good alpha. Like Cher is
yeah.
a really good alpha female because she's not um she wants influence because that seems to be like, it's healthy and normal. The same way that Morticia Addams wants influence.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what she's doing with influence that matters. The the approach that Cher has is, I'm going to find this this skated tomboy and I'm going to turn her into a beautiful little butterfly and show her, how cute she is, and I'm going to find her a nice boy who's going to college, and she kind of wants to upgrade and do a glow up for this friend of hers. So she wants to see the best in the girls around her.
Mm-hmm.
That's not normal. That's not a normal way of behaving. I mean, if you find,
well, it's not normal in the sense of it's hard for women to do, rather than it's not.
Yeah. No, it's just uncommon. Sorry, it's probably a better way of phrasing it. It's uncommon, and I mean, sorry, my brain's veering off into so many different directions with this, but
hey,
I lived
Simone
in
de
a
Beauvoir wrote 800 pages and she couldn't get as far as we are in one night. So we will probably have to revisit this, but we're breaking new ground here.
Okay. Well, I'll say something else a little controversial. I mean, I lived in a polygamous African country for quite some time. So I've seen marriage relationships that are not like Simone de Beauvoir's pseudo monogamy, or what the French did, which is institutionalize a mistress. I lived in a country where you can openly say I'm the third or fourth wife, and it's completely fine. And no one bats an eyelid, but no one wants to be the third or fourth wife.
Right.
And this is where I study the dynamics between women, because what happens in those families when the first wife is told that there is a second one coming? They're not living in the same roof as each other. This isn't, it's not Utah or something. But
well, I don't know. Maybe some of those families they all have their own houses too, but I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. But in East Africa, no, the women don't live in the same house. But it's the stories you hear on the street, because women talk. They're always on the phone, always talking with each other. We always know what's going on with each other, and it's the stories we hear. Okay, what's going on with Sheha? There's a second wife. That's what's going on. This crashes the reality of that woman's home life, and it's completely just how should I put this? It's completely alien to the West, because we still have an expectation that there's going to be one man, one woman.
Right.
And so the way that women behave, even when they're behaving badly, we understand, because we expect that at least, the accepted culture says that, yeah, it should be one man, one woman. But when you're a woman and you're living in a country where it's acceptable that you become one of four at some time in your life, that competitional dynamic, that Debbie versus Morticia thing, is savage. It is cutthroat. Like you've never seen it before. It's like a Wall Street. It's like, you see the guys on Wall Street trading stocks.
Right.
Like Wolf of Wall Street, only it's women, and what they're saying to each other and doing to each other and how they're communicating. And that intensity of competition, that I have this man and I'm going to hold on to him, knowing that if he chooses to get a second or a third, you have absolutely nothing that you can do about it, really.
Well, and also, I mean, this is in Islam, right?
Yeah, it's an Islamic
and
practice,
also that
of course,
if he doesn't want you anymore, he can just divorce you.
Yeah, all he has to do is say it 3 times and give you a piece of paper and you're gone. You could have given the man the best years of your life, and all he has to say is, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and you're gone. That's it. You're out of the family. Now, that is the reality that people don't talk about in the West when they're discussing what's going on in Islamic countries and everything. I mean, like, you talk about women's oppression. They're going to defend themselves and say we're not oppressed because, and I will say in their defense, Islam does allow for some things that sort of tried to mitigate them not being left in absolute penury. But when you're in sub-Saharan Africa, that's the reality. So the girls have to come up with all sorts of devices and strategies and modes and plots and plans and everything else to make sure that they make it as difficult as possible for their husband to get a second wife. And then when he does get a second wife or a third, whatever, you know, adjust to the fact that she's sharing her husband. So it makes things really tense psychologically. And so the women in those countries, women in the place I was living in particular, they've developed a telephone line of psycho games that's an Olympic standard. No one will come close. It's been institutionalized to the point where the fabric that the girls wear, the kanga, it has a panel on the front of it. It's called the name of the kanga, and there's a saying written in Swahili, and it's a kind of folk dialect, right? They'll have a proverb on it, or they'll have something. It's like the Twitter update, their Twitter post. You know, it's like girls updating their Facebook status. They'll get a new kanga with this thing written on it. Now, these sayings are so obscure and ambiguous, most of the men can't read them. It's a woman's language. And it's a way for like street battles. You see girls coming out of the houses wearing something like "he's mine, you'll never take him from me," blah 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 blah, all sorts of things. So that to me is a woman's world. That's where I was introduced to the dynamics of being female, of being a woman, what that really means in terms of relationships towards men, but also the relationships of women towards each other. And Debbie versus Morticia is a cross-cultural phenomenon. It's not just a Western thing.
But it occurs to me that, I mean, what de Beauvoir is, you know, she's in France in a nominally Catholic, sort of, not even nominally Catholic. It wasn't nominally Catholic, but, you know, she's thinking about, and she acknowledges it. I read that part where, you know, Christianity gives women this sense of equality, which is true. It's like that Christianity, and I've said this, I got in trouble for my 3 Cheers for White Men post because I said that, you know, that Christianity recognizes chivalry and consensual marriage, and that you know, elevation.
Yeah, that's been your argument.
Yeah, that elevation of women, in fact, to, you know, the equality of having a say in the marriage. I do. It's like de Beauvoir is taking that for granted, completely, and not acknowledging. I do want to go back and reread it in the sense of looking for the absence. Right, she's not acknowledging the actual women's hierarchy that you're describing, which is it's still, I mean, it's still you know, focused on the men and their relationship to the men, but it is,
yes,
it's funny that de Beauvoir makes out her independence wanting to be independent of a man, and what in fact she's achieved and doesn't acknowledge is, or that she didn't, right, independence of other women.
Well, that would make more sense. If you've been engaged in that kind of psychological warfare, because it's a kind of psychological warfare, and exhausted by it, yeah, you want to tap out, of course.
There was a picture I didn't understand. You have Morticia and another woman looking at U.S. News and Time What does he stand for?
Oh yes,
The silver fox.
that was her at the school for the parent teacher meetings with the children, and then they have a recital. So I just thought it was funny because it was the Addams version of dealing with education of the children, dealing with the school issue. And in the 1960s series, they're homeschooling until someone from the government knocks on the door and says, your children should be in school.
It's actually the first episode of the program.
It is episode 1?
Yeah, it's episode 1.
Ah, okay. I forgot. So they're umming and ahhing this. Okay, maybe they'll send them to school, but so they're homeschoolers, right? They're completely, trad homeschoolers. In the film, they've sent the children to school. You see the behavior of the kids compared to the other ones, but I just thought it was kind of interesting that the matriarch of the Addams family, she's in the hallway, and she's looking at the world that's being presented to her children as the ideal on the wall. There's the kids' projects and what they've done, and it's people that they admire, people that they want to follow after. So the people that she's looking at on the wall, I think it was cleverly done. There's a George Bush, and
it's Barbara Bush, I think.
Barbara Bush. It's George and Barbara. And she's trying to stifle her horror. These are the role models that the kids want to aspire to. And of course, she goes to Wednesday's project, and Wednesday's got a dark, goth, scary horror picture of one of their ancestors that got burned at the stake. But again, it's a kind of mockery of what I thought the Addams were really representing, which was the Catholic world. Wednesday's depicted her heritage. She's depicted her ancestors. So it's like, what would it look like for a child now in the modern education system to do a picture of a saint as I want to be this person for their school project? Right. Horrifying. It's the same thing. So we have an issue for for women to really think about, who do we want to emulate? Who do we want our children to want to be like? The conservative culture in the Addams family is, okay, you want to be Barbara Bush. Well, many don't. Many never did. I never did. I never wanted to. I wanted to be Wednesday Addams and have. Well,
you have the meme of Morticia saying, "I'm just like any modern woman trying to have it all: a loving husband, a family. It's just I wish I had more time to seek out the dark forces and join their hellish crusade. That's all."
Exactly.
But I thought your point about
there it is.
It's like wanting to be they're surrounded by the cemetery, which is their own family, right? They're actually always surrounded by everybody who was their family and their ghosts and things like that. But they've not been cut off from their own family at any point, right? Not in death or. Which is, you say, yes, it's Catholic in the sense of we pray for our dead and remember them and don't think of them as gone. And neither do the Addams.
Yeah, we have
they're around, all the ghosts are there.
Well, we have the relics of the saints in our churches, so for us to go in there and we greet them, say hi, how you doing? Like, thank you, please pray for us.
Right.
The Addams are doing the same thing. They take a stroll together and they grab a shovel and they go dig up old Aunt What's-her-face just to say hi and then put it back down again. I mean, to me, it seemed like it was a very, very similar family dynamic that I thought, okay, she's a Catholic matriarch. She's actually the most perfect depiction of a Catholic matriarch in a Catholic family, sitting there in the graveyard, surrounded by her ancestors, generations of Addams. She's a part of a family, you know, the family. It's a very Italian, very, very Greek concept, but she knows who she is. She knows she's got all of her people around her, living and dead, perfectly happy. So yeah, that was.
So the family portrait is all of them there with the bear rug, which growls.
Yeah.
Right. But so I think, I mean, we've had this theme a number of times in our discussions about the tension between the Anglo and the Spanish, and that he's Gomez, and that, you know, everything that he did. One, he's horrifically, you know, he's tremendously wealthy and always working with his investments and things like that. But that he fences, of course, at least in the television series. I guess no, they do in the movie too. And he is romantic in a particular way, and that it's interesting. I think with the cartoon, it's not clear to me that they were. I mean, it's drawn in Boston, right? And I was like saying, is this it can't be the Addams family of Henry Addams, because they were Unitarians. So I think you're right to pick up on the sort of haunting of, you know, and de Beauvoir is, you know, in a Catholic context and is educated in the French system, so she knows something about the Middle Ages. But this haunting of modernity by the Catholic is very powerful in both the second sex and, you know, the Addams, with the joke being, as we're saying, that they seem scary, but they're not actually scary. They're actually the most wholesome family in the neighborhood.
Yep. Well, a mother and father Addams are genuinely in love. They have their elderly mother at home. She's not in a retirement village. They've kept her at home so she can help educate the children. The bachelor brother lives there, so Gomez isn't isolated socially. He has members of his own kind around him, you know, from his family, but also they do business together. They're running a family business. You know, all the investments and everything he does with Uncle Fester. The kids are homeschooled. They're around the family constantly. They have, you know, it's like they're free to play with electrical circuits. It's just, they're actually the most wholesome people that exist in their universe, in the Addams world. And they're so, you know, they're very mystical as well, which of course, you know, is sort of presented in an occult frame. But really, Catholics to non-Catholics look occult. And that's always the Protestant accusation against Catholics too. It's like, oh, you're praying to the dead, you're idolizing pictures of those people. You know, you've got men in weird dresses and weird hats. You know, you've got your popes and your bishops, and why do you need priests? We just pray directly to Jesus. So it all looks very occult and superstitious. It looks to the Protestant world exactly what the Addams family look like to the pastel world. And then, you know, Pastel Debbie comes in, which is unfortunate. I mean, I don't want to give away the film, but
well, she's played by Joan Cusack, which is just like, you know, super, right? Because she's so good at it.
So
she's
fantastic
so good in that role.
She was born to be that character. But yeah, I think it's like this haunting of the old world, this haunting of the Catholic world. You know, and I include the Orthodox in there. I mean, Orthodox Catholic, you know, apostolic world, but like Mediterranean culture runs like this. Baltic cultures run like this, and they're happy, but the women are thriving in the institution of the patriarchy. They're not trying to pull it down. So it's like Catholic women thriving because of the patriarchy of the church. You know, we don't have the Orthodox don't have any ambition whatsoever to change our patriarchal structure, because the patriarchy to us isn't something that you pull down as a feminist. The patriarchy is something you submit to in a liturgy, and in the church structure, because you know that it serves you. Like the patriarchs are serving the women as the women are serving them. So it goes both ways. I'm losing my train of thought. I forget what else I put in this, like.
Well, so you've made your case on the Addams, right? And I think then we end up in the sense of it's like what do women really want? It's men to be a particular way. And
yep.
I mean, it's always struck me reading de Beauvoir, and she's complaining about all of these things that are good, in the sense of, you know, men see women in these, I mean, somewhat idealized ways in the different mythological roles that she analyzes, but that from her perspective, even the elevation of women in, you know, the respect for mothers, or the love of beauty, or the desire for the you know, the virginal women to become mothers in a family, for her all of this is oppressive and restricting. And that's, you know, that's been in modernity the claim that, you know women are taught at university by scholars like de Beauvoir, that becoming any of these things means that you are less than human. But then you know, de Beauvoir does not flip it back around and think, you know, what do men want, which we've seen in the poetry, but the assumption being that women don't want to be those things, that this is demeaning to their humanity to be just a womb, right? It's like, well, you may get your wish, and we may have no women because the wombs are, you know, mechanical, and everybody's born like a, I don't know, a chicken. That's like from little mechanical eggs or something, right? It's this terrible, I mean, Gnostic desire to be free of incarnation. And ironically, I mean, this is not really on our plan to talk about it, but ironically, in a time when the you know, the medical situation is actually quite strong for women, that they don't die in childbirth typically. And so many of the arguments that were made in the early 20th century about, you know, restricting pregnancy because it's dangerous for women to have so many, don't apply in the same ways. Although, given the way our medical system is going, I'm not sure that's true anymore. But I didn't prep for that, so let's stay off of that particular.
Let's pretend everything is going as well as it was 15 years ago.
I'm back to the puzzlement of why would you want de Beauvoir is not positing this, which is ironic. She's not positing a world without men. She's positing, in fact, a world without women, in which women can fulfill themselves as individuals by achieving the same things men do. And therefore, she isn't, what is a woman is for her something to be erased. There's nothing in her expectation that is not, in fact, I mean, she says simply human, right? She wants there to be no genders, although she still wants to have sex, as we know. So erasing the women also erases the men, whom we have, here, Mr. Tate is our counter example.
Yes. So many thoughts on that gentleman. He's going to wreck women, and not for the reason that the mainstream media is saying that he's going to wreck them. See, I'm too much of a contrarian, is my problem. I always say, write about toxic masculinity, but not for the reason that they're saying that there's toxic masculinity. He is not a Gomez Addams. How he's made his money, straight off the bat, has been the manipulation and exploitation of the women around him. So what that does is that sets in that African hyperdrive competitional instinct. Now, it's interesting that he's ended up in the religion that he's converted to, because
He's converted to Islam now?
he's converted to Islam, yeah. Now, what he's done is he's created a business empire on jacking up a woman's cortisol and jacking up her desire to be safe, protected, secure, and to understand her place in a family system. He manipulated that, and then he sold it. He pimped it out. For me, I don't have any idea how anybody who wants to return to a traditional Christian society can see that kind of person and think that he is going to be a good role model and smash the matrix. He hates women. And the only thing he does is talk about the queen protecting the king. He always says it. In chess, the queen can move more than the king. In chess, the queen protects the king. Yeah, but not in the way you think. Because Gomez understands this by having a queen at home with him who's taking care of the family, for the king, for all the other family members. Morticia does her job properly. She's watching for Debbies. She's watching for people that are going to destroy the family system. Tate has promoted himself and his Hustlers University, and then I think in like a really good poetic twist revealed where that kind of exploitative masculinity ends up, and that's in Arabia. Now, I want to I'm not going to hate on all the Muslims because I know great Arabs. I've known some really wonderful Arabs. But that pain that the Arabian women have to deal with when they're told that there's a second wife is deep. And the dynamics of that kind of family structure is not Addams. Things become very transactional. And so I picked that picture because
We'll go back to him. I'd moved on to the brothers, but
the
comparative brothers too. You've got the Tates versus the Addams.
Yep. The Tates versus the Addams. So for me, this was like okay, women, what do you want kind of moment. Because they've presented themselves as the alphas. They've presented themselves as the guys that all the girls want. We've got the Bugattis, we've got the, I don't know, warehouse palace in Romania or whatever. And because women go into competition with each other, and these guys have been presented as the alternative to the effete or emasculated Western men that won't do anything or say anything, or they're not building patriarchy. So it's like, aha, here's the alternative. Here's your ideal. They're not at all. They've got exactly the same attitude towards women that the Debbies of the world have towards the men that they pluck out of their hierarchies. Right. It's there's a word I'm trying to think. It's coming to me. It's like it's opportunistic, and it destroys femininity, because what it does is puts women into it puts those women like the Tate brothers. What they've done is they've put those women into a role, into a position where they're not able to flourish in their femininity. They're whoring it out in order to survive. in a hostile environment. And
Well, ironically, the Tates have made them the second sex.
yep.
In this, I mean, that's what's so painful for me reading de
Yep.
Beauvoir, that she's talking about men's respect for women making us secondary, when in fact she's in a culture that did develop a respect for women unparalleled in human history, and all she can see is uh not being a man. I mean, it's not even, she doesn't even want to be a man. I don't know what she wanted to be, because what it's like continually saying she wanted to be a human being. It's like she's erasing all of the dynamic of relationships. And I think what you're talking about, saying that women are relationships, that's clearly what she didn't have. She didn't have actual,
Yep.
not even friendships. I think women's friendship is tricky and not the same as men's friendship, and that's probably not, that's probably deeper waters than we're even ready for today.
Yeah.
But what you were saying about women fundamentally being the ones that keep track of everything, right? We keep track of all of the relationships. We watch everybody. We are always paying attention to who's talking to whom, and because that is the thing that we need to know. We need to know what all of the relationships are, and it doesn't seem to me that de Beauvoir knew any of that. She didn't participate in that kind of attention. And it's not even clear to me she participated in that kind of feminine rivalry, weirdly enough. She's so hyper focused on wishing that she had this different relationship with men that she doesn't even see other women. And the Tates, I mean, it's like the Tates are a good contrast with the Addams. It's like you could, I think the pictures you have here, the Tates are known as being the masculine men, and here we have Gomez and Fester blowing things. No, they're drinking together, right? They're drinking together, and they're the brothers, right? It's like the most masculine men you have. They're being brothers together, and that as a joyous thing for Morticia rather than as something that she would fear or want to destroy.
Well, they're sitting there watching home movies of like the family. They're sitting there as they're drinking in that room together. They're watching reels of themselves like trying to kill each other. You know, like, but it's really cute. You know, it was like, I mean, that's how the Addams bond, right? It's like a comedy horror. But you know, like remember when we did this and that kind of thing. They're sitting there together and they're in the family home and they're watching all the old family movies together. They're not they don't have a matrix to smash. They're home, and the idea of like turning the women in their lives into digital prostitutes is I mean, it just, that does not enter in. They love the women that are around them. So, you know, the doubloons in the basement of the Addams mansion, I mean, they don't come from sex trafficking.
Right. I mean, mind you, we're not sure what they come from.
Well, who knows? It's probably drugs. But still, I mean, I like, in terms of just them and their approach to the women that are around them versus the Tates, it's black and white. You can't truly thrive as a woman when you're around men like Andrew and Tristan Tate. You never will. They will give you stuff. You get a lot of stuff, and that's it. Because ultimately, everything is transactional. When you're dealing with someone who can sell someone else after making them, after deceiving a woman into thinking that you're in love with her and then selling her. Women are not able to flourish around a man like that unless he finds Christ. That's it. And then, you know, there's a rebirth experience that needs to happen. But once someone has admitted openly that his job was to make women believe that they were in love with him and then whore them out, that is not the ideal. That is like the very dynamic that has created the feminists in the first place. That is why women
Well,
hate
yes, it's like
themselves.
because that's what Sartre did to de Beauvoir.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
And so she
Exactly.
then tries to theorize herself out of this pain. And I'm sorry I couldn't find that passage that I was thinking of, because there's this clear, it's like when you get down into it, her eroticism is she wants to submit to the man, and she in the sexual moment, and that's how she describes it obsessively. And and that it's a mystical sort of experience, and that she never got to experience what Morticia has with Gomez, which is his reverence for her, and therefore whatever. I mean, it's so interesting with Morticia and Gomez, and it was you're talking about this, and I went and watched the whole series again. I'm like, yeah, it's he's utterly devoted to her, and every she says something, he can't stop kissing her. But on the other hand, he's taking care of the business. Now, interestingly, because it was the 60s and these things are all being undone, there are episodes in the second series when Morticia, once she starts writing books, and Gomez is really worried that she'll become famous and go off on tours and he'll be alone. And so he tries sabotaging the books by writing bad ones, and those sell really well. So, then he's in even more trouble. And then there's another episode where she's making horrible sculptures, and he keeps buying them, so she thinks she's making like good ones, and so she starts making more. So there is a kind of interesting problem that she is trying to find her expressiveness in other ways in later. But then the series died, right? It's like you could tell by the end of that season, they'd lost their focus because they were trying to tease out playing Morticia into a modern woman who has a career, and it didn't work.
No. Or trying or misrepresenting artistic expression as wanting a career,
right.
I think.
Right.
Because of course that's what modernity expects. The moment you say you're interested in something, or you're good at something, or something makes you happy, it's, oh, you could do that as a career.
Right.
I've heard it a million times. Oh, you're really good at that. You could do that as a job. No, I don't want to. I'm just happy. Modernity treats women's interests, I think, as not important unless they're monetized. Whereas Morticia, to me, she had her interests that were her hobbies that made her happy. She was always doing things, gardening, cutting the heads off roses, etc. And then, brewing things with her mom, and they were always doing something. It wasn't ever to emancipate themselves from the family.
Well, it's
not an attempt at emancipation.
The example of the men doing crazy things with Gomez and his train blowing up, and then this young man who got it, who did something funny that you were entertained by this, getting himself buried. Right. It's like, I think this is the obverse. The men doing these nonsensical hobbies that don't make money either. They're edge tests. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Gomez with his trains, I was like, he's gaming. This is like he's a gamer. He's taking time off the game. But that guy in the ground, so I think it's Tim Hardy, his name was. I found this a few days ago. He's an Irish guy. He was an Irish guy. And he wanted to do this experiment to prove the fairies weren't real. Now, of course, everyone in modernity thinks, of course, fairies aren't real. You're insane. But in Ireland in the 1960s, people were very, very savvy to the idea of fairydom existing. So they're terrified, they're terrified of anyone disturbing the habitation of the fairy folk. So this guy called Tim, he's had enough. He's like, right, I'm going to prove that this is absolute nonsense. And he organizes a stunt on Christmas Day where everyone's going to bury him down in the earth as though he's a dead man in the area where the fairies are supposed to hang out, and then cover him up and leave him there for over 100 hours. I think it was exactly 100 hours he did of the he wanted to do. So I took some books in there and probably, you know, a little bit of water or whatever, and they buried Tim alive and left him there with a tube coming out of the ground, and then a phone that people could call him on and talk to him. So if we go back to the phone, the communication, he still needs it. So they're talking to him while he's under there and saying, "How are you doing? You feeling claustrophobic?" He's like, "Nah, I'm fine. I could stay here for another 100 hours." Huge crowds have gathered around this guy because, I mean, first off, it was kind of an amusing thing in the beginning, and then they're all realizing, wow, he's really set his mind to this, and then it sort of becomes a bit of a respect thing because you know they're all thinking, well, he's got balls, he's letting them bury him alive. So the crowds are gathering, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then they finally dig him up. Before they dig him up, the journalist's standing there with his mum, and he's asking the mum, you know, how did you feel about this? She goes, "Oh, I've died 1,000 deaths since he proposed this," and, you know, saying how horrible of an ordeal it was, and then pivots immediately to, "Oh, I'm tremendously proud of him." You know, she's glowing. She's so happy because Tim's decided to bury himself alive for the lols, for absolutely no reason whatsoever except for just to be able to tell everyone, "I buried myself alive." So they dig him up. And as they open the coffin that he's in, he's got these really dark black sunglasses on. Just gives the thumbs up as they open the lid. It's hilarious. So why I included that, what did I contrast that picture against again?
I've got Gomez blowing trains up.
Yeah. Men doing weird things. Just for the lols, just a game, just to be able to let themselves stretch themselves. And this is not something women do. We do not allow people to bury us in a coffin under the ground to prove fairies don't exist. Women don't have any interest whatsoever in making themselves that uncomfortable. For a lot of reasons, but we do not need those kinds of bragging rights. This is like a very specifically masculine thing. It's not for money. It's so that they have some point of honor that they can tell everybody, "I did that. That was what I did." Tim's mother, I think, was a perfect example of good mothering. Because even though she died 1,000 deaths since he proposed what he was going to do, she let him do it. She didn't try and stop him. So, in terms of what women want, like going to the theme, I think is that. I think the crowds around Tim proved that was kind of, that's it. Like women, that got women's attention.
Yep. Well, this is so, I background to it that, say, Simone de Beauvoir is really interested in men. I mean, massively so. And she's talking about how irritated she is that, you know, all men's images of women, all images of women are through men's eyes. It's like, well, yeah, so you're looking at what men think, and not, as we've established, what women think. She's not going and talking to her fellow women and trying to figure out what they think about her. That women are very, it's like, it's so funny because men are very interested in women are very interested in men. I personally find men fascinating and completely unreadable in a sense. It's like, I remember this particularly when I was younger. It's like, you're always like, what do you think? And you're like, your boyfriend, what are you thinking? He's like, shut up. Why do you care? Right? It's like, I'm thinking stuff, right? It's like, what it is we're checking. I think we need to do, you and I need to do some more episodes on this theme because we've gone now 2 hours and 16 minutes.
Oh yeah.
um, there's more to break down in, I think, honesty about the relationship between the sexes, which simply has not been talked about for decades. And it's
Mm.
interesting to me that academia, obviously where I live, has created such a taboo on talking for women, talking about what women actually want, that we have no clue. I mean, we do have a clue, but we don't have a we don't have I'd say it's maybe this way, we don't have the older women's honesty about their own
Mm.
desires to learn
Yeah.
from.
Yep.
And I spent this last weekend at a Sursum Corda, lift up your hearts retreat that the Institute for Christ the King holds, for young adults. um and now I forgot what I was going to say. A lot of young people there in their 20s. um Now I completely forgot what I was going to say.
Older women talking to younger women
Yeah,
about what they want.
it does seem there is some of that conversation among Catholics, but I don't know, right? Because
Mm.
I still feel like I'm an outsider in so many ways because I didn't grow up Catholic, so I don't know what they're going through. They did seem as a group to be very happy. They were. I
Mm.
promise you, this was the best fan. And I was like, I didn't know I had a fandom. They were they were so enthusiastic at my talks and at the canons conferences talks, and just, this is what young Catholics who do trad mass are like. Bring it. They
Mm.
were very, very hopeful and optimistic. And obviously, I mean, they did a little talent show, and the men were singing about their hopefully future wives, and the women seemed, genuinely. There was one um, skit that I remember, just a man and a woman doing it, and she just seemed fascinated by his ability to sing this nonsense song. Right? It's like I can see every so often you get a glimpse of what a beautiful actual relationship would look like, and you say that's what
Mm.
we're aiming for. That's beautiful. That is what hurts when we don't get it. We should talk about that, the actual romantic vision that
Mm.
we do carry with us, and that de Beauvoir wrote an 800-page book denying, which is fascinating in
Mm.
itself.
Yeah, it is. No, everybody wants Morticia and Gomez, at least in my mind. I mean, he's who wouldn't want
I'll
someone
go
looking
back to
at them like
Morticia and
that?
Gomez, and we will do Christ.
Yeah.
We will do Christ and Mary some other time. Morticia and
Mm.
Gomez. Who wouldn't want this? Yes, exactly. He's
Yeah.
marvelously manly. He's, Hispanic. Maybe we should go there with Don Juan de Bosco, and but gentle and attentive to her, and I mean, is so worried about losing her that he writes bad novels that then become bestsellers for her. Which is, that one was a funny twist, but the pain and the fear that he had that she would go off and have this career, I think, was also
Mm.
well scripted. That maybe men aren't expressing enough of what that feels like to be left.
Mm. Yeah, everyone needs to start getting very honest.
Yeah.
For the sake of the younger generation, definitely. But I don't see creative pursuits need to conquer the career of the family. And this is a challenge for women that are gifted, talented women. We have this problem. I put myself in that category just because I have to. When you are wanting to enjoy something, the world is going to tell you constantly that this is going to be a career, this is going to be a career, and then
Right.
pumping you full of that instead of just enjoying your talent. And I've seen this happen with women that have been in my life, incredibly talented women. I've seen them buy the propaganda that other women are giving them, and men also, that their talents and their gifts have to be translated into a career instead of just something that they can express within the career of the family. So
I think this certainly fits our major project in Dragon Common Room of cultivating the arts. And what does that mean? And that is, I mean, ironically, that's, you'd think that was what de Beauvoir was trying to cultivate. It's like we can only be truly creative under certain circumstances while denying the actual creativity of the family, which she did.
Well, her family didn't seem very creative. So unfortunate.
Okay, so we've dismantled it. Now we have, we will now, there's going to be a season 2. I redid the website, so we have promises season 2. Clearly, having spent a whole nearly 52 weeks, this is number 50, diagnosing the structures that are at traumatizing everyone. We're going to have to start building, aren't we?
Yeah, we have to.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
What women want? Well, learn to knit so that you can make baby clothes with 8 limbs. No way. And figure out why it's so terrifically painful to figure out who you should marry, which is, I think, at the root of a lot of all of this.
It is.
Which is what Cher was trying to do in her matchmaking. You didn't mention this, but you do know that Cher is Jane Austen's Emma.
Yes.
So we have Jane Austen matchmaker who never.
It's an old problem.
Who never got married herself. So this we want to find our mate, and we want to have a beautiful family, and we want to have those lovely children. And why is it so hard? We're going to become agony ants if we're not careful.
It's good.
Well, I hope it's good. Okay, so we've had some conversation going on in the chat. And I'm not sure, Wild Herb Ways, I don't know what you're talking about, but I will read this scene as you've been cheerfully commenting. So fascinating. Your comment, RFB, related to differences in female friendship where the female quantifies, watches relationships in a sense of objectifying relationships. No, we don't think of them as objectifying. Their relationships. We're intimately subject within them, and we're constantly trying to figure out our place within them. So it's not objective in making objects. So in understanding estrogenic philos versus estrogenic agape or estrogenic eros, you have what Dugan describes as the function of intranets, the quote panopticon, a territory in which criminals could be watched and supervised at all times, surrounding them from all points of view by both glass and impervious walls, end quote, during the COVID psyop pseudoplague. The nature of the modernist intranet is female as in surveillance, monotonous advertising. Yes, that's the diabolical version of it. That's not what we were talking about. But it is as masculine tyranny is Tate-like, feminine tyranny is Debbie-like.
Yeah.
And we probably do want to explore that some more. But I think Wild Herb Ways is showing how, just as like Simone de Beauvoir has for nearly a century defined the way women talk about the what is woman question, and we can see from 2 pages and Kiltz's insight that it's a problem. And we have, I mean, I don't even know what literature, I mean, there is some literature in the Catholic world, and I can think of a few people that are writing about this, but it is interesting that we have gotten to a place where the best we can do is say feminism is cancer. I think we have some work to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do.
Well, that's actually a happy thought. We have lots of stuff to talk about. On our internet telephone.
Like typical women who like talking. We got a lot to talk about.
We got a lot to talk about. Well, okay, so we will continue with that and hope that we don't end up in surveillance. There we go. Okay, thank you all for joining us. Sorry we had a missed week. We will not have a missed week for a while now. We got episodes to come, and we will do a switchover season in August so that you know that you've actually completed an entire circuit of the sun with us in the Mosaic Arc. So let's see. DragonCommonRoom.com. Subscribe. Get on our email list. Newsletters out on Fridays. Secret stuff that you won't get unless you're on the newsletter. Mm-hmm. Good night.